Our next panelist, ladies and gentlemen, is Mr. Stephen Tucker. Stephen is the founder and principal broker for SBS Incorporated. He's earned the moniker and trademark of subject matter expert in public policy when it comes to health insurance reform, most notably the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, colloquially known as Obamacare. From keynote speaker to author, and he's published numerous reports on the ACA, and has also offered commentary and quoted in numerous publications and national news outlets, including the Wall Street Journal, Fortune Small Business Magazine, and Fox News Business, as well as various industry and other business journals. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. C. Stephen Tucker.
Great. Good evening. Thank you all for coming. Just want to go over with you a few things about how we got to where we are today with the new healthcare system that we're under. There's been a lot of changes, as you know. It all started with the Supreme Court decision. We all waited for it to get there. That was in June of 2012. And we all, those of us on the right end of the spectrum, that there's no way the law could pass the muster of the Supreme Court because you can't expand the Commerce Clause to include forcing someone to buy a private product. So they just skipped the Commerce Clause, and in the Supreme Court decision they struck down the Commerce Clause argument, and instead Justice Roberts just took out his eraser and said, let's see, it's not a fine, it's not a tax, it's actually a fine. No, it's a tax. So he erased the word fine, put in tax, and said Congress has the power to tax, and then let the legislation go forward. The Supreme Court has one major responsibility, and that is to rule on legislation that has been written. It is either constitutional or it is constitutional or not constitutional. They can't go in and take a clause and say, well, I don't like this, so I'm just going to erase it and then put this in and then let it go forward and call it constitutional because Congress has the power to tax. But that is precisely what happened. And the reason it had to happen that way is because President Obama was saying over and over again, what? I will not raise your taxes. Not your income tax, not your payroll tax, not your excise tax, not your capital gains tax, none of your taxes if you're under $250,000 as a couple or $200,000 as an individual. So he could not sell this as a tax. If you remember, there was a certain vertically challenged reporter from the mainstream media named George Snuffleupagus who did an interview with him, and he said, Mr. President, I got the dictionary right here. What you're doing is a tax. Look at it. I'm going to read it to you. And what did President Obama say? I reject that definition. Only President Obama can reject the definition of something in the dictionary. But he had to do that so that when he got to the Supreme Court, they can make the tax instead of fine argument, right? So that's what they did. And that's how we got to where we are today. But there are other ways that we got there. We were told that there are 47 million uninsured people in this country, and they called them the uninsured Americans. And I always wanted just one reporter before the law passed just to ask one question. It was a question I was screaming from my living room. Who are these people? Who comprise the 47 million? So the U.S. Census Bureau decided to break them all down for us in 2011. So we found out that 9 million of them make more than $75,000 a year and don't buy health insurance. And we found that another 11 million make more than $50,000 a year and they don't buy health insurance. Then we find out that 12 million aren't even Americans, but they included them in the 45 million uninsured Americans. Then we found out the uninvincibles, right? The invincibles, the kids that are between 18 and 25, they're in there too. That's 14 million more. So when you whittle down all those numbers, the real number of American uninsured is 8 million people who are chronically uninsured and are just above the Medicaid eligibility levels to qualify for assistance. Those are the chronically uninsured. Do you think it's possible, just possible, dream with me, that we could insure 8 million people for less than $2.6 trillion over the next 10 years? You think that's possible? I guarantee you it's possible. In fact, we waste every year $760 billion in the American healthcare system. If we asked our omnipotent officials in Washington, D.C. to just be half efficient and just cut half that waste, you could insure 50 million people for the rest of their life on a policy that will make the CEOs of Blue Cross Blue Shield breathe with envy until they're dead. So if we can do it without spending any more money and we can be more efficient, why aren't we doing that? I'll tell you why we're not. Because it's all about one thing: control. That's exactly right. Think in your mind, what's left in the private sector that is not controlled by the federal government? What's left? Insurance is not completely controlled by the federal government. Starting January 1st, 2014, all policies will be designed by the federal government. And they're going to be what? The gold, silver, bronze, and platinum plans. Those are the ones that are designed. Yes, ma'am, they're not. Tell me why they're not. Until when? Incorrect. When they renew, ma'am, when they renew in 2014, those policies will become metal plans. Here's how the rule works. There are three kinds of health insurance exchanges in the law. They're outlined in Section 1311 and 1321. Section 1311 says, here are the powers given to that agency we know we can all trust so much, the Internal Revenue Service. Yeah. Powers are given to them to provide what I call OPM, other people's money, to artificially lower the high cost of Obamacare health insurance. They can only do that in a state-based exchange. They can also only penalize employers, full-time, those with 50 or more full-time employees, a $2,000 excise tax if they don't provide Obamacare-approved health insurance, but only in a state that accepts a state-based exchange. Well, 26 states have said, we don't want a state-based exchange, so they put a federal exchange in instead. It's called a federally facilitated exchange. That in itself, ma'am, is a violation of the 10th Amendment of the United States Constitution, which says all powers not granted to the federal government by the United States, by the states, are retained by the states. So that in itself is a violation, okay? But I want you to know what Barack Obama's been doing, okay? He's been ruling unilaterally, illegally, and unconstitutionally, not just by himself, by granting 4 million people a waiver from this law starting in 2010. Many of them his politically favored union buddies, right? Who just got another waiver from the taxpayer to pay out all of their premiums so they can keep their Cadillac plans. Guess who gets to pay the Cadillac tax starting January 1st? Me. That's correct. He also illegally, unilaterally, unconstitutionally delayed the employer mandate for another year so the employers would have to face the $2,000 excise tax. He has no authority to do that. None whatsoever. But in 2012, while no one was looking because we have a fully compliant Praetorian Guard media, NBC, CBS, MSNBC, CNN, let me call you all out, PDS, right? Because they didn't report on it, here's what he did. He called the IRS and said, hey, if you guys aren't so busy attacking conservative groups, Tea Party groups, Christian groups, Jewish groups, if you're not too busy with that, I'd like you to rewrite the law and empower yourselves with powers you were not given in the original legislation. So here's what he did. When states like Rick Perry's state in Texas, right? States like Indiana, states like Missouri, pretty much everybody around my state in Illinois, right? So we don't want a state-based exchange. Here's what happens. In Section 1321, federal fallback exchanges are described, right? In that section, those fallback exchanges have no power given to the IRS to artificially lower premiums or to penalize any employer in that state. None of them. So Barack Obama said, yeah, there's 26 states. Yeah, they don't want a state-based exchange. Could you just write a little bridge law between 1311 and 1321 and give yourself the same powers you have in state-based exchanges to federal fallback exchanges too? So you can penalize every employer in the country, so you can give OPM to everybody in all 50 states, which you weren't authorized to do in the original legislation? That's what he did. And immediately Scott Pruitt, the Attorney General in Oklahoma, filed a lawsuit. He already had one against the ACA. He just decided to add on that, suing the Internal Revenue Service for illegally writing law. The IRS is not a legislative branch. But that is what this president is doing, ruling by executive fiat illegally, unilaterally, and unconstitutionally. And that is why most people are upset at this president. His ratings in the last month, his approval numbers, have dropped by 9 points. That's historic. They're lower than they ever have been. Why is that happening right now? Because, let me imitate the president, if he doesn't mind. Where's my teleprompters? There's one there and one here. Okay, ready? If you like your plan, you can keep your plan, and no one will take it away from you, period, right? He promised the American people this, and the only protections he gave to people who have existing policies is if you own your policy before March 23rd, 2010, when the Obamacare law passed, you can keep it until I take it away from you. And that's precisely what he's done. You see, all of these plans that were passed before then, right? They changed it. They tweaked it. without Congress, without the Senate, without the president's signature. They just rewrote it in there and say, you know what? We're going to publish in the Federal Register in June of 2010 that, yeah, 69% of these plans, they're not going to make it. They're going to go away. And starting in 2014, thanks to the Department of Justice, we just found out about one of theirs, October 23rd statements in the court, that another 93 million employer-sponsored plans will be terminated next year. Now think about that. That's 93 million plans. Do they all insure one person? Multiply that by an average of 3 or 4, because these policies are family policies. We're talking hundreds of millions of people losing their health insurance. Exactly the opposite of what this president promised to us. So, that is how we got here. There were other ways we got here. Barack Obama also said that his mother, his own mother, fought cancer with her evil health insurance company in 1995, and they wouldn't pay any of her medical bills. They were so horrible, right? Even had, and we know it's true, you know, because Tom Hanks told us in the 2012 movie put together for Barack Obama's election called The Road We've Traveled, right off a cliff, right? And Tom Hanks told us that his mother suffered with cancer. She had to battle with her insurance company. So ABC News decided to do a little bit of investigative research. I call it a random act of journalism, right? And they found out that Barack Obama's mother in 1995 was fully insured by her employer in Bethesda, Maryland, which paid all of her medical bills, less her deductible. Every time I tell that story, somebody in the back of the room goes, the president is very busy. There's no way that he could have known these minute details. And my answer is always the same. Do you know who the attorney was that represented Barack Obama's mother in her disability claim? You see, her only contestment was her disability insurance, which wouldn't pay your what? Your mortgage, your house, while you're laid up in the hospital. All her medical bills are paid by your health insurance. Guess who represented her? Barack Obama. That's right. That's right. So, that's how we got here. Where are we going now? As you know, Mitt Romney's advisors were in the White House helping craft Obamacare for the president. Thanks, Mitt. Appreciate it. That's why Obamacare emulates Romneycare so closely. Only they changed it. You see, Kathleen Sebelius has more power than the president, Congress, the Senate combined, because the worst words in the legislation are, the secretary shall. She can rewrite it whenever she wants. And so she decided to change the law. And I'll tell you what she did in a minute, when I get to the third thing the president said. Where's my prompter? They can drop your coverage when you get sick. They do it all the time, right? Remember the joint session of Congress in 2010 where he told them that about 2 horrible stories about a woman named Robin Beaton from Texas, whose evil health insurance company dropped her coverage because she discovered a case of acne, right? And then he talked about another guy from Illinois. One man from Illinois had his coverage canceled, his treatment delayed, and he died because of it, right? Is that true? Guess what? Lynn Sweet from the Chicago Sun-Times decided to do another random act of journalism to find out, is that true? Because she knew 1996 HIPAA law. What's that? Public Law 104-191, Section 2742 prohibits any health insurer in this nation from dropping your coverage when you get sick. And you know who we can thank for that? President Bill Clinton. Because President Bill Clinton put those ironclad protections in place. Okay? So, President Obama said they can drop your coverage when you get sick. He lied about it all the time. The story he told to the Joint Session of Congress was about a guy named Otto Raditz. He's only 20 miles from me in Downers Grove, Illinois. So Lynn Sweet decided to contact his sister, who survived him after he died of cancer. The only true statement was, he died of cancer. That's it. Obama said his policy was canceled by Assurant Health Insurance Company of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Okay? They delayed his treatment and he died because of that. The reality is Assurant Health sent him a letter. And the letter said, hi, you just bought health insurance from us and you're filing cancer claims right away. We wonder if you told us the truth on the application. And if you don't tell the truth to any insurance company, regardless of what you're buying from them, what is that called? Fraud. And that is the only time they can drop your coverage, if they convict you of fraud. The same protections in 96 HIPAA law, which is Public Law 104-191, Section 2742, are also in the Obamacare legislation. Okay? So the only time they can do that is if you committed fraud. So it turns out he didn't tell the whole truth on his application. So they sent him a letter saying, we're considering rescinding your coverage. What is rescinding your coverage? Rescinding means we're going to return you to where we found you. We found you uninsured. We also owe you some money back because you paid us premiums. So we're going to give you all your premiums back from the first day you bought the policy, less any claims paid out. So immediately his sister called the Department of Insurance in Illinois. The Department of Insurance called the Attorney General's office. The two of them called Assurant Health Insurance Company in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. They said, listen, it's true. He didn't put his full medical history down. If he had known about it, you probably wouldn't have given him insurance coverage. Please don't cancel his coverage. He needs a $200,000 bone marrow transplant to save his life. You know the true story? Assurant Health never canceled his coverage. They paid his claims for 4 more years, including a $200,000 bone marrow transplant that saved his life and extended it for 4 more years. The president lied again. That's the truth. So, the last thing I will share with you, it's what's going to happen and how Sebelius changed the law. Mitt Romney, when he wrote his reform, which is called Mass Care, which we call by slang Romney Care, he would let you get health insurance whenever you want it, right? So you'd wait until you were what? Sick. And then you go out and you get your policy of choice. So what people were doing was they just wait till they were sick. I'm going into the hospital for an MRI on March 3rd. I'll get my policy on the 2nd, and then I'll use it for the MRI. On March 7th, I'm going to cancel it because I can get it again later, right? So that's what they were doing in Massachusetts. They buy them, drop them, buy them, drop them. 20 health insurance carriers said, bye Massachusetts, bye. We're going someplace else that's not crazy. And premiums went up as high as anywhere else in the country, and they're still higher today in Massachusetts than anywhere else. And I did say Massachusetts, okay? So Kathleen Sebelius decided to rewrite the law and make it better. So what did she do? She looked at the states who derive their own solutions for pre-existing conditions. Another lie the president told is, if you're dropped for coverage, if you're denied for health insurance, where is it? You're left with no options, right? Is that true? It's not true. Where do pre-existing conditions come from? Who caused them? Congress in 1996. Congress wrote HIPAA law. And in HIPAA law, Public Law 104-191, Section 2742, it outlines that if you have an employer-sponsored health insurance plan and you retain it for 18 months, if you lose it by losing your job, the next employer's got to cover all your pre-existing conditions so long as you get that coverage within 63 days. Who knows that, right? That's why they give you, what do they give you when you leave your job by law? What? A certificate of credible coverage. The employer cannot deny you even if you're Michael Jackson in a hyperbaric chamber. They have to cover you, okay? Those are solid protections. But when they passed HIPAA law, they didn't extend any protections against pre-existing conditions to those of us who buy our own health insurance, individual policy holders. At 1996, that wasn't that many people. Today, it's 14 million individual policy holders. We can be denied coverage for pre-existing conditions because we're too heavy, we smoke too much, too many medications. That's wrong. How do you fix it? 2,700 pages double space? 960 pages single space? Oh no, 1 sentence. Just add 1 sentence to existing HIPAA portability law that says the following: all individual plans are now protected like they should have been in 96. And there are no more pre-existing conditions. But until we are that smart to add 1 sentence to existing law instead of writing a 2,700-page new law, the states decades ago realized that individual people could be denied health insurance. So they opened what's called high-risk health insurance pools. In Illinois, we call it ICHIP. In Indiana, you call it ICHIP, okay? We call it the Illinois Comprehensive Health Insurance Plan. And all it does is the state regulators say, hi, Mr. Humana, welcome to Indiana. Hello, Mr. United Healthcare, welcome. Aetna, Cigna, come on in and sell your products. However, if you deny anyone health insurance for your individual plans, you're going to give us a percentage of your profits every year, and we're going to manage that pool of money. And that risk pool money will be for people who you deny coverage for your individual plans. In Illinois, for decades, nobody could be denied health insurance from ICHIP. ICHIP would take you, and Blue Cross Blue Shield is the sole administrator. So you're walking around with a pre-existing condition, seeing the same hospital, same doctors that anybody with a Blue Cross policy has. That existed in 35 states, including right here in Indiana. We had 10 other states that were called guaranteed issue individual mandates. Steve, what the heck is the guaranteed issue individual mandate? States like Ohio. Ohio is the exact law that Sebelius changed Obamacare to emulate on June 15, 2011. The exact law. Here's what they do in Ohio. We don't want a risk pool. We're going to make every health insurance company that operates in the state of Ohio issue coverage to people who are sick and 4% of their block of business every year, one 30-day period a year. And it's usually in March. And everybody can go, and if UnitedHealthcare fills their 4%, they have to report to the Department of Insurance. The Department of Insurance says, you got your 4%? Send the sick people to Humana. Humana's got to fill their 4%, then Aetna, then Cigna. And they've never maxed out all 20 carriers in the state of Ohio. Not even close. And everybody in Ohio has coverage for pre-existing conditions. But what can't they do? They can't get it all year long whenever they want. Why is that? Because they'll drop it if they can get it the next month. So it provides the consumer a strong impetus to keep that policy in place. Right? And it has worked in Ohio. So guess what's happening in less than 60 days nationwide? Starting January 1st, we're going to emulate Ohio all over the country. Starting January 1, every American will have access to guaranteed issue coverage, regardless of pre-existing conditions, from every carrier in the United States. Whether you purchase inside the health insurance exchanges and get a subsidy, or you purchase outside and you don't get a subsidy. Every American, but only during 2 open enrollment periods in 2014, from 1/1/14 to 3/31/14. Then that door closes, providing you an impetus to do what? Keep the policy, right? Then it's going to open up again on October 15th, and it's going to stay open until December 7th. During those 2 open enrollment periods, any American can get any health insurance from any carrier who's offering a qualified health plan. Okay? Starting in 2015, open enrollments will start emulating Medicare open enrollment. Medicare open enrollment, we're in it right now, is typically 10/15 to 12/7. Well, that's how national health insurance open enrollment is going to be from this point forward, starting in 2015. So that prevents adverse selection. But adverse selection will still exist. What is adverse selection? Very simple. You're a multi-millionaire CEO of a big, evil health insurance company, right? And you want a $50 million key man life insurance policy. So you call the insurance company and say, yeah, what's the premium? Yeah, I need $50 million coverage. You think your insurance company is just going to issue that to you over the phone? No. They send over what's called a risk adjuster. And the risk adjuster wants to know a couple of things. One, are you 450 pounds, a chain smoker, and go hang gliding on the weekends? Because if so, you are not a good risk to this insurance company, so we're not going to cover you. Adverse selection is an insurance company insuring you without knowing everything about you, right? So when Sebelius rewrote the pre-existing condition rule, it was to cut down on adverse selection, right? Well, we're still going to have adverse selection because why? 3 reasons. Young people will not be buying health insurance in the exchanges. Why? First of all, they need 5 to 7 million of them, right, to lower the cost for everybody else. That's why they had the NFL. Got it, thank you. That's why they had the NFL say, hey kids, look how cool health insurance is. Buy it in the exchanges, right? So they asked the NFL to do it. The NFL said, no, we're not going to do it. The reason kids will not be is 3. 1, the fine for not buying health insurance is 1% of your modified adjusted gross income. So you've got a child who was working, a young person, 40 hours a week, before Obamacare, and now he's working 29 and a half, right, because the employers pushed him down to avoid the fine. 1% of his income is about $300 a year. The cost for health insurance, especially if he doesn't get a subsidy, is $1,500 to $3,000 a year. 2, Reagan's Law, EMTLA. He can still go to any emergency room anywhere in the country, and they can't turn him down if he can't afford to pay. And 3, he's got 6 months out of 12 where he can buy any health insurance policy from any carrier regardless of pre-existing conditions. Right? Lastly, and I'll close with this, because I'm running over time. Why is health insurance so rotten, stinking expensive? Everybody blames the insurance companies. They're so evil, they want to rake us over the coals. Look at the premiums, they're crazy. Why is it? I'll tell you why. Go back to 1979. Nationwide in all 50 states, or 57 if you're Barack Obama. In all 50 states, right, you could buy health insurance, right? And in those states, the combined amount of federal and state mandates everywhere, the whole country, was 252. And they were all for medically necessary expenses. You must cover breast cancer if you sell health insurance in this state, right? Very solid, good rules. Today, who would like to guess how many federal and state mandates we have on health insurance nationwide? Anybody throw me a number? Good God, that's even worse than it is. 1,900 by the year 2009, 2,262 today, right? And in 2014, we're going to add 10 more, so it'll be 2,272. Now, that sounds like a lot, right? And there's no way possible that 2,000 new medical conditions have developed since 1979 that we have to cover that are all medically necessary. So it sounds like a lot. Well, I'm a visual guy, so I brought them all with me today. Say hello to all of the mandates. This is the reason health insurance costs so much money. And are they all medically necessary? Oh no, let's look. Let's look. Hair plugs. Hair plugs? If we're paying for Biden's plugs, we got ripped off. What else? Health club memberships, athletic trainers. I mean, the list goes on and on. All this, there's almost so much of this is not medically necessary. Get the big boot of government off the private sector, and premiums will go down.